Using the Civil War as a backdrop, Sofia Coppola with The Beguiled continued her evolution in style with this remake of Don Siegal's original 1971 film, only this time shooting from the women's perspective rather than the man's. As the arrival here, signified by Colin Farrell's Soldier of Fortune at the girls' school, begins to stir feelings in both students and Nicole Kidman's teacher alike. The film was viewed by Coppola as a way to cleanse herself after 2013's The Bling Ring from what she terms as such a tacky and ugly world. But at the same time, would this be a step too far for Coppola, taking such a popular property and then subverting the viewpoint? I'm Elwood.
I'm Kim.
And you're listening to Movies and Tea. Let's take it to the booth. Well, welcome one and all to the end of season 3. The end of our reevaluation of the Sofia Coppola filmography, and it's certainly been a season that's really felt like it's flown by. I don't know about yourself, Kim.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it flew by, especially because, well, it could also have to do with the fact that, Sofia Coppola has less films to look at, so it was one of our lighter months, and we didn't even have to double down on anything, so...
No, and certainly when we look at other seasons that we got planned ahead, there's going to be some pretty heavy opening bumps, should we say, where we try to work in as many films of the filmography as possible. But certainly with the Sofia filmography, I mean, it's been such an interesting sort of journey. Just this, while many people sort of view her films as being all very much the same, I think there's certainly, as we've gone really from the Virgin Suicides to now ending on The Beguiled, there's really been sort of movement changes in the style that we've seen from her. We've obviously seen her do the sort of social satire with those mumblecore undertones with the likes of Somewhere and Lost in Translation. We've seen her do adaptations, obviously, with this film and the Virgin Suicides, and we've seen them do like more modern and sort of contemporary films with the likes of Bling Ring, which obviously marked her only venture into working with digital, and now with The Beguiled, it seems to returning to shooting on film and really taking on a film that she originally had no interest in doing, but it was really the urging of the production designer Anne Rose that sort of made her reevaluate her sort of stance on the film and looking at ways that she could possibly update it. And certainly when we get into the film, we can obviously see that she certainly has brought a new spin to a film which I don't know whether it's a sort of a well-known film or not. I suppose it depends on how much of a Clint Eastwood fan you are, but certainly the 1971 version was something I wasn't familiar with prior to doing the research for this episode. So
yeah.
But did you have any sort of connection at all?
No, I didn't even know, like, until you said before that it was from, like, the previous one was from a man's perspective. I have no idea. I just went into this one, like, just like that. I didn't really do a ton of research either, so...
Okay.
Yeah, so, I'm gonna apologize right now. I sound really nasally, so it's gonna be...
The film itself is also based on the book A Painted Devil by Thomas P. Cunningham. Coppola actually said that she used the book mainly as a framework rather than a straight adaptation, like when she did The Virgin Suicides, which was more of a straight adaptation. Feeling there was many issues with the book and the fact that it was also felt very dated. Now, certainly with the film, unsurprisingly, she's chosen to go with shooting from a woman's perspective, and certainly this is something that we've talked about on previous episodes, like with the Virgin Suicides and Marie Antoinette, and even to an extent Lost in Translation, the fact that Sophia likes to shoot from the feminine perspective, and certainly seeing women, showing women sort of on that cusp of burgeoning into womanhood, which certainly becomes a real key theme here, as the film itself is set obviously during the Civil War. We're about 5 years into the Civil War when the film's set, and the school itself, this all-girls school which the film is set in, has pretty much been abandoned. All the help and most of the teachers have gone. All that sort of remains is the one teacher here, played by Nicole Kidman, and there's about 5 students that are left, and she's basically trying to run the school as best she can, and it's really when one of the pupils, Amy, comes across John McBurney, here played by Colin Farrell, who's a soldier of fortune who's escaped from the battlefield and has ended up on the school grounds with a wounded leg, and he gets brought into the school, and it's really just this presence of a man in an all-female environment that starts to stir sort of feelings amongst both the girls and the older ladies of the property. And this is where the film sort of follows. It just follows the sort of changes as McBurney obviously starts to recover from his leg injury, and the effect that his presence starts to have on the school. So how did, just from terms of story, I mean, how did you find the story? Because I mean, this is obviously a more straightforward story. There's nothing overly sort of complex in the actual plotting here. It certainly didn't feel like, at least.
No, I don't really think there was anything too complex here. I think the only thing was, you wonder if the things they did in the process of what he was there, obviously leading up to the final act, whether it was something that, as he suspected, that it was out of, jealousy, or whether it wasn't. I think that was the only thing at the end, right? But in the beginning, it was really just, you kind of see where everyone stands, like the girls, how they feel about this man being in their residence. And in this world, kind of like where, they do have a lot of soldiers and such that wander by, kind of, but they wander by and they're like, they kind of have a bit of exchange to see like what's going on outside and whatnot. But, there's a lot of things that I think that, the girls have a sort of depth to them. And in some ways, the school kind of, for us at least, it feels like it circles back a little to Virgin Suicides. Because it feels a bit like the balance of the characters feel a bit like, Virgin Suicides with, the age differences and the different things they see. Yeah. And like, just a man. Like there's, the girl who finds McBurney is more of like, viewing it as a friend more than trying to, get his attention. Just like, whereas, you have Elle Fanning's character, who is more of a flirty character in this one, where she really wants to get his attention. She really wants to, like, seduce him.
Definitely so. And when we're obviously first introduced to the sort of structure, you've obviously got Miss Martha, played by Nicole Kidman's character, and she's sort of at the top, and she keeps everyone in line. Yeah, she keeps everyone on task. She's like the headmistress, That's right, and she comes off initially as this very sort of stern character, and certainly as the situation develops, you feel that she's more the way that she is because she has to retain control, and she keeps the girls very sort of separated from the outside world. She doesn't really allow them to have contact, as you said, with the wandering Confederate soldiers who go past the ground, and we constantly hear the war that's raging on the background as we see like plumes of smoke and we hear the cannon fire, and so the war's constantly on the doorstep there, but at the same time these girls are living off in a very sort of enclosed world, and like you said, it's like the Virgin Suicides where you've got the girls who are sort of trapped in the family home and they don't have that sort of exposure to men or boys or so the outside world. It's the only world that they know is the world within the grounds, and certainly with some of the characters, you can see that perhaps it's kept them in a more childlike, innocent sort of state, as we see them sort of like playing games while they're doing chores and things. And many of these girls are sort of like older than you would expect to be doing, to have like that sort of still sort of that childlike innocence to them. Although I have to say that when it comes to Ellie Fanning's character, who's supposed to be 18, I felt she was a lot younger, which made certain scenes later in the film a lot more awkward.
I wasn't sure what age she was supposed to be in the film itself, but I mean, like, back in what it was like the 18, it was set in 1864. So I mean, back then it was like, girls would be married off earlier as well, right? So it's not really like, it's not really like a huge shocking deal whether if sometimes we watch these films and they're married off at 15 or something. So to me, even if she was 15 in the movie, like she was playing someone who was 15, it wouldn't feel too awkward, I guess. Like I kind of just took it as It reminded me a bit of like Pride and Prejudice, also because of all the girls and how they would interact with them. And she was just more of the type which she was really wanting to get, like, she really likes attention. I think that's what her character is, and I think that's what makes this film fun and interesting. Not fun, but interesting to watch. Is more like every single character has some kind of tension point and some kind of the way, like, different levels of how they control their feelings and how they view is the proper way to be a woman. So obviously, you have Miss Martha who obviously has a lot more control of herself, but in certain moments by herself, you also see that, she's very much affected by this man coming into their boundaries, and that, in one scene where she's treating his wound, and she just, and he's like unconscious sort of thing, and then she goes and she has to like wash her face, and we see that camera just panning up and down like his body as she likes cleaning him and stuff. And that scene is like, it's more like from her point of view, like she's watching this man, and she's obviously Miss Martha is older also, and we learn a little bit more that she's had some kind of relationship before, so she's not as innocent as everybody else that's at this school. So obviously she's a bit more turned on, but she's trying to control herself also from this situation. But on the other hand, you have Kirsten Dunst, who plays Edwina, which I guess is a teacher, and she's like, she also, is controlled by Miss Martha, but at the same time, she has, she definitely is older in the crowd, and she has a lot more, like, in her mind, she's comes from a different background, and, they always bring that up about how she comes from a different type of family, and, maybe more like a city girl or something, and, that sort of stuff, and it puts her into a different place when she's trying to also, close, you feel like she's more, she controls herself even more than Miss Martha does.
I really love the way that the film shoots the interactions with the girls and Colin Farrell's character. It really brings into mind, I mean, this was something that was highlighted to me, the fact that we're obviously used to the male gaze, here Coppola's using the female gaze, because she's objectifying Colin Farrell's character. The girls are never objectified in any way. They're very sort of buttoned down, and they could not have more layers on. Well, Colin Farrell's there, with his shirt just open slightly. We get a hint of leg, and it's sort of like it's like she's shooting this the same way that a male director might shoot an attractive young woman, and I thought that was just absolutely fascinating to watch. That you're watching just Colin Farrell just being used as an object of sexual a desire, and I think it's just perfect sort of casting. If you're going to cast someone in that sort of role, the same way that obviously with the original version you would use Clint Eastwood back when he was sort of like rugged and had that rugged sort of charm to him, and Colin Farrell's sort of like the very good modern day equivalent of that role. And I love the fact that he's got that sort of rough edge to him, and the fact that he's a soldier of fortune, so he's basically fighting for whichever side can afford his services, really removes any sort of ideology for his sort of character, so we're not sure whether we're supposed to side with him or not. That whole argument has been removed, so it doesn't matter if he's part of the North or the South. He's just this soldier who's wounded, and he's at the mercy of these women who are there just to sort of look after him, because he spends a good 3/4 of the film just locked in a room.
Yeah,
he has no way of getting about it, and certainly once he recovers and suffers an accident, shall we say, which we'll go into a bit later, which causes him to lose the leg, he's further at the mercy of these women, as he's left to sort of hobble around on crutches. And I thought it was just such an interesting way to view things, and it brought to mind like films such like Black Narcissus, and I just, as I said, it was just such an interesting way to put the story. I mean, obviously it's easy enough to put the film in the female perspective, as she's obviously set to do, but to then start making these sort of changes in how we're shooting certain characters, it was just really quite fascinating to watch.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, you know, and it's really great because there are some, you know, I want to go a little bit more into like how Coppola chooses to shoot this also. There are a lot of scenes where we go like where they go into, you know, that room where the corporal is. And it's just like all the action revolves around that room. And a lot of times she uses those still shots where it's just on Colin Farrell. But we hear the door open and close, and then we never know who it is until that person comes in. And I really like the idea of doing that, because every single person who comes in has something different that they're looking for. There's some kind of attraction, or there's some kind of, you know, friendship, or there's some kind of, you know, resistance, or, you know, obviously there's seduction as well. And every single time, you know, these little moments is that why the camera kind of hides a bit of those things. And that's what I've always loved about, I think, this whole journey of reevaluating Coppola's work, is that we see like that really, really charmful way that she's able to, you know, control the camera and be able to just capture a moment, but keep a part of it still behind the scenes. And you know, and that goes for, you know, even the opening scene of this film, which is done so well, because it kind of like, you know, you start the scene and you're panning up from like, if you're panning down from the trees as you hear a girl like just carelessly just kind of like humming in the background. And then you kind of see her walking down the road, but as we pan down, we hear all these gunfire and cannons going off. And it really like kind of like just sets that situation of what's happening right now really well. And you know, that's something that I really appreciate from what she does.
Definitely so. And like you said, the film is not using any sort of fancy sort of camera work here. It's very much keeping the camera often fixed, especially with when we are in Mac Burnley's room. He's always kept us at the center of focus, and the other characters who sort of come in and out of frame, as depending on what they're obviously doing. And it certainly always, the camera's always playing the standoff. It's never trying and invoke any sort of emotion in the character. It just lets the characters do the talking and you know, we put across their own sort of intentions. And I love the fact that the rising tension within the household is so subtle. The fact that one or two of the girls that start like putting on jewelry, or they start bringing him gifts and things, and you only sort of like get it brought to your attention in the scene where we've got Kirsten Dunst's character. She gets in a disagreement with one of the other characters over it because they've decided to steal her earrings. Mm-hmm. to impress the corporal, and at the same time she retorts that, oh, you're wearing that pin that you haven't worn since last Christmas, and highlighting the fact that, you know, she's also making these subtle efforts as well, because while neither of them are making like these big sort of gestures, they're all making these sort of subtle these subtle changes to themselves and the way that they act. And as you said already, it's not all romantically inclined. There's a couple of girls who just want like friendship, such as the girl who's got the Henry the Turtle, mm-hmm. who until McBurney's arrival was the only man in the household. Something I didn't like though, in terms of cinematography, is the fact that everything seemed to be lit by candle.
Yeah, it was it was lit by candle. Some scenes worked better than others. Yeah. And then there was also that really artistic kind of like sunlight through the trees, which happened a lot whenever we got like the faraway view, or like, the shooting to the next day, we would have that. I don't really mind those. I'm more of like I don't know, that's how I take pictures, so I don't really mind. I find like it's kind of like a artsy way of doing shots, but sometimes it's like it makes it really hard to be able to see what's going on, depending on, you know, what you're watching on as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was only mainly during the sort of a couple of the evening shots where it was as you say, it's difficult to figure out what I'm supposed to be watching. Certainly, the scenes around the dinner table, it works really well, and certainly the way that the characters' faces are illuminated looks absolutely stunning. Certainly Nicole Kidman, who is just such a presence here in the film, and I was never sure which side she's on, whether she's obviously got harvesting her own sort of attraction there, or she's sort of playing a more sort of stern and sort of strict role and just determined to get this sort of stranger out of the house as soon as possible.
Well, she obviously has an attraction, because there was a moment that she wanted to kiss him and then she got interrupted. So, there is an attraction that she wants from this person, and I think that, one of the main things I think in this sort of angle of looking at things is whether, like, who is at fault in all this, right? When he loses his leg, right? After that accident happens. Is it by his own doing? Or is it really that, what leads to all this? Is it because he's like, he's kind of like toying with them? He's toying with a few of the women, and then he goes back and he's like, obviously we're kind of entering spoiler alert here, He goes through that, and after he loses his leg, he's like, oh, this is all your scheme to keep me here and all that stuff. And, it's because I wouldn't go in whoever's room and whatever. And you're just like, well, you are kind of a dirtbag. So I don't know if I want to side with you right now, like, you see him and it's like at the beginning you feel like, oh, well, he seems like he's resisting everybody else, and he really has his eye on Edwina, and he's like really charming her and seems like such an, just a really great guy. And then, like, suddenly the movie just flips around after he feels better, right? And then he gets invited to dinner, and then he feels the sudden desire that, to accept the affections of Alicia, and then you have Miss Martha trying to kiss him, and then you have, like, Edwina, obviously he seems to be hinting that he's gonna go to her room, sort of thing. But, it's kind of like, it all hangs in that balance, but you never know what his decision is. And then when he makes a decision, obviously it causes, him to the end game of him of losing his leg.
It certainly provides the breaking point when he makes his choice for which of the girls that he's actually going to engage in a romantic liaison with. Up until that point, though, it seems that, there may be a purpose for him, because he's very, on the surface, yes, I mean, he's obviously this handsome corporal, but at the same time there's so many other complex elements to his character. Yeah. I mean, the fact that he's considered both like a traitor and a coward, or at the same time can be viewed as smart because he didn't die he chose to run away rather than die on the battlefield. But at the same time, because he didn't, he can be viewed as a coward, because he should have obviously stayed and fought, because that's what he was obviously paid for. When he starts getting better, he's able to provide help around the gardens, and he's seen there, cutting branches down the trees and tending to the gardens and stuff. And I have to commend that Coppola didn't have him take his shirt off at all. I was just waiting when we see him doing the garden scenes. It's like, oh, he's going to totally do the Diet Coke thing. He's going to take his shirt off and get young girls flustered and stuff. But no, he actually keeps his shirt on, and he's just tending to the gardens and stuff. And you think, oh, maybe he has this sort of purpose, and you get the feeling that sees that, if he can make himself seem that he has his purpose, that he can be like the gardener or something, that he'll be able to, this will be his way out of the war. He can just sort of hide out on the grounds and earn his keep, so to speak. But then when we have the big sort of dinner sequence where he's flirting with the girls and we obviously, as I said, he ends up in the bed of Alicia, which as we said before, it's very sort of complex because of Alicia being played by Elle Fanning, looking a lot younger than she's supposed to be. So when I was watching this, I was like, oh my god, is he a paedophile? the fact that he turns down these two mature ladies, to go with this young girl, which obviously leads to him being thrown down the stairs and breaking a leg, which then Miss Martha is forced to amputate. And it's really once he realizes he's got his leg that he becomes a very mean-spirited sort of drunk, and it's the real darkness starts to show for his character. And you have to wonder, had he not had his leg amputated, would we have ever seen that darkness? Because the whole time that he's introduced, as soon as he arrives at the girls' school, it's very much like the mysterious stranger who comes into the quiet community and then starts causing trouble. And you're kind of waiting for that, but it never seems to come until he obviously loses his leg. But again, this is at the decision of Miss Martha for him to have his leg amputated, which he deems to be the best thing, but he obviously sees it as a way to be entrapped.
Yeah.
Which
I feel like a lot of his anger and a lot of his darkness comes from that desire that, it felt like he was kind of in control of the situation before, and then now he's trying to not be controlled by them. So he's trying to, kind of take the reins again. So he finds a way to kind of coax them into, to not only being mean, but also like for people who are still willing to be nice to him, to kind of coax them into helping him turn the situation around. He gets a little manipulative, but at the same time, he really, like, the movie didn't paint him to be a really good character, right? He's not like a great person that you're going to stand behind and be like, oh, he feels like a victim. Well, I guess you feel bad for him when he's screaming in pain. But then at the same time, for me, I was like, well, you kind of weren't too great, You try and toy with too many girls, and that's what happens.
You tried to beat the house, and the house won. That's the problem. He's so like he's trying to play his odds, and he's so like, oh, I can like set up like all these like engagements with all these girls, and then ultimately the house is like, no.
Yeah. So like the deal is, in the end, you realize that. I mean, in the end of all this, I feel like I'm jumping ahead, but in the end of all this, what it feels like is that when things get tough, the girls group together and find a way to get rid of their threat.
They do.
And I just find it amazing because, at the same time, it puts so much question into, Edwina, like Kirsten Dunst's character. Because, she goes through, I think, the biggest fluctuations in her character, where she kind of goes through all those emotions of, controlling herself and not trying to let loose and having those attractions to this man, and then, suddenly eventually giving in, and then all of a sudden, at the end when, the way that, they end things with him, she feels very like, she seems like she's like, okay, well, this distraction is not there anymore, so I'm just going to go back to listening to Miss Martha.
Certainly so. The problem I had with her sort of character path was the fact that we have this scene of intense violence and aggression.
Yeah.
And then she she has sex with McBurney in a scene which I wasn't sure whether it was her way to distract him and turn his attentions away from the other girls, or whether she was just taking something, finally being able to have seen the freedom to take what she wanted from the situation.
I think in a certain way it was kind of like a win-win situation for the girls, at least, not for him. But I mean, like, in a win-win situation where I think subconsciously they all were trying to protect themselves, but at the same time, she was getting what she wanted while she was able to distract him, and trusted in the fact that Miss Martha would use this opportunity to find a way to, kind of figure a way out of the situation that they were in. Because obviously he was being a threat to them now. He was trying to, really be the man of the house, and I would assume that since they've been the women of the house for so long, they weren't very happy about it.
It's just really when we get to that final sort of dinner table sequence and McBurney's talking about moving on, that I got the feeling that she would be going with him, because she's very much sat next to him, and it feels very much that they've formed a sort of more romantic partnership between them. And the fact that when he's removed from the picture, that her only sort of choice then is to either leave the school or to fall in line. And it, as you said before, is that when the situation goes dark, the girls revert back to the status quo, which is obviously to fall in line under the sort of guidance of Miss Martha, and have where she regains her sort of position as the queen bee of this hive, and everyone else falls in line with her. And it's sort of like that, whatever sort of like spell that McBurney had over these girls is suddenly sort of broken as soon as we have that sort of moment of violence and aggression, as we said, where he's sort of showing more of his true colours. But at the same time, it's also hard to say, is this his true self, or is it the fact that he's just woke up to find he's missing a leg? I'm rather understandably upset about that.
Yeah, well, obviously he's upset about it, and that definitely triggers a lot of the darkness. But I think that deep down, you know, he was controlling a lot of this side of him. Because, you know, there's those little moments. I don't know if you caught them, but there are little moments in the beginning of the film where you really feel like he's doing this so that he can kind of charm his way to stay. Like, there's, like, little moments where, you know, Miss Martha does something, and then she turns around, and then he has this, like, little kind of, like, evil laugh kind of thing. I like, an evil chuckle kind of thing. And it was those little moments I kind of, like, doubted his personality a little. I was thinking about whether, like, he actually wasn't, you know, such a great guy. I mean, obviously he's not, because, you know, he's fighting for, you know, money. So, but I mean, at the end, it's kind of like, maybe they had a bond, and maybe he did want to change. But at the end, like, the girls, I think that the whole idea of using a woman's perspective here is that it's kind of like, if a man is bad to you, you should go. You know, it's kind of like a lot of the abuse thing in life, where if you're getting abused by someone, which is what he was doing to these girls. Yeah. Pretty much. You know, in, you know, when his personality got really dark, like, he was, you know, when Alicia tried to, you know, be nice to him, he was like, he was trying to, you know, just trying to, you know, coax her to do things, but by being very violent, by pulling her hair, right? And, you know, even you know, Amy, who was the one who found him, who treated him like a friend and didn't have anything to do directly with the situation, he turned around and, you know, he threw her turtle out, you know, and there's all these things that he does that, you know, you can't really blame them for, at the end, to see this person being a threat to the normalcy they had around them, to kind of, like, create war inside their own residence. So what they did was really out of self-defense, because, you know, you can only assume that the women, especially Miss Martha, acted out of the good of, you know, saving his life. So it's a different point of view, is that she thinks she's saving his life by amputating his leg, whereas he sees it as, you know, as he says, a house of mad women trying to control him kind of thing, right?
I think, yes, and at the same time, when he's obviously loses, like, he's really at the mercy of these women. I mean, he doesn't know if he's going to be turned in to the Confederates, and could we see them coming to the house and they ask if they've seen any soldiers, and obviously Nicole Kidman's character covers her and say that, you know, they've not seen anyone, it's just her and the girls are at the house. So there's obviously this fear from his part that he's obviously going to then be at their mercy, and that if he doesn't fall in line, he's going to get turned over to either force, really. So I love the fact that when these girls obviously sort of bond together, they become this much more powerful force, and the fact they're able to put into plan this sort of final game, which adds a fun little bit of tension as we get into the final dinner party sequence, where it looks like another character may get bumped off as become like sort of collateral damage in this situation. But the final sort of shot of life returning to normality at the school, I thought almost had like a almost horror sort of edge to it. Almost like the sort of best sort of horror films, really, when you look at how life can just these girls have removed what was causing their issue within their community, and now life can return back to normal. And the fact that it's sort of very symbolized by the fact that he's sort of cast outside the gates.
Yeah.
So he's removed completely from this world. It's not so much enough just to sew him into the sack. He has to be like completely removed from the ground so that his presence can no longer sort of taint their world.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and it's very nice because, you know, like, at the same time, like, she also, like, Coppola also does that whole, like, you know, what I really love about her, that whole ending and finishing moment, right? So you have that opening scene where you have that same shot coming in where they're carrying him in to the house, and that same shot of carrying him out is that same angle of camera. At least I think it is.
Yeah.
As it looks very similar. And it's just so amazing that every single time we watch one of her movies, it's like, you know, just a snippet of that life. You know, that moment where this person came into their lives and that chapter is done, you know? And things have gone back to normal.
She does live in a very sort of... her stories have got very much all wrapped up. She doesn't seem like the sort of director who's creating things for sequels, certainly.
Yeah.
They're all very enclosed in stories.
But at the same time, I think there's, you know, so much to love about that kind of movie because, you know, in a world where everybody wants to milk every single franchise in the frickin' world, it's just, you know, it's really nice to see that there's someone who's making stories just to tell stories and just to tell, like, different stories, but, you know, trying to use, you know, not only, you know, from a woman's perspective in many ways, but also just, you know, telling stories in kind of like a different, you know, in just kind of like a microscope, right? Just like in that little moment of someone's life. Obviously, I'm like a freaking indie snob now, I think. So I'm really appreciative of people who do things like that, because that's, you know, a great part of indie movies is making movies like that, who are smaller scopes, but, you know, have a lot more depth. And, you know, just the fact that Coppola is able to change, you know, to make this adaptation and really, like, be able to use those hour and a half that she has and create these characters that still show a lot of depth, but, you know, have a kind of, like, you know, fluctuation and as well throughout and development throughout their character. And it's really nice. I you know, I think the Beguiled is done really well.
When it comes to the film's historical context, obviously this is set during the Civil War. Now, in the original novel, there is a black slave character called Matty, who is actually removed from the film completely, and this did raise sort of controversy with people familiar with the property, to say that Coppola was attempting to whitewash history by removing this character, and she actually responded by the fact that she felt that the film she was making, she wasn't trying to bring in sort of like questions of like race and slavery, and also really objected to how the character was written in the 1966 novel, where she highlighted the fact that the character doesn't speak proper English, her voice is not even grammatically transcribed, going on to say, "I did not want to perpetuate an objectionable stereotype where facts and history supported my choice of setting, the story of these white women in complete isolation after the slaves escaped. Moreover, I felt to treat slavery as a side plot would be insulting." She has also cited the fact that she did not want young girls sort of like sort of watching her films and, you know, thinking that these are the only roles that African American girls can sort of play, and I think it works well, the fact that she removes the character from the plot. I mean, it's not an essential character to the film, and certainly keeps the focus really tight on what the main sort of plot here is, and the fact that it's, you know, it's about the girls and the effect that that this soldier has on their lives, really. And I think I certainly didn't feel that the film lost anything by removing sort of elements of slavery. Understandably, the Civil War was obviously, slavery was a key part of that conflict, but by not having it featured here, I didn't think we're certainly losing anything. We certainly get the elements of war from like the glimpse of the soldiers and the noise in the background, so the war is always there, but it's not essential to the story being told here.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, the war was the backdrop of the story. It wasn't the main focus. The main focus was about, jealousy and betrayal and the tension between, the girls and having this, mysterious stranger enter their lives. That was the main story behind it. I don't think, obviously I don't know the source material, so I don't know how key that character was, but I think that keeping it the way it was, kept the focus to what she wanted to portray.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a, when you view look at sort of slavery and racism, it's not something that you can sort of brush over lightly. You've got to really sort of give it time to, and the focus it deserves to highlight such issues. So by removing it, you're in many ways removing the distraction it would cause, because it's only going to add to your runtime, and certainly with the film at a brief hour and 30 minutes, which it's funny to say now, but when you compare it to everything else, which is 3 hours plus runtime, the fact that we have an hour and a half film that keeps everything so tight and at the same time has a feeling of looseness to it, it's a real sort of credit to Coppola's sort of timekeeping as a director, really. For reviewing, if you do like The Beguiled, where do you sort of go next? Is there anything that you sort of want to compare it to?
Well, I already mentioned a few of mine, so obviously I would pair it. If you wanted to stay on Coppola, you would go to Virgin Suicide, which is very comparable, especially with a lot of the scenes. Like the dinner scene with all the girls giggling. I was like, whoa, Virgin Suicide has the exact scene.
That's good for
And we even have Kirsten Dunst. And then if you want to go kind of like that same era-ish, I don't know, and with Nicole Kidman and kind of more horror, I would say The Others would be a really good choice to go. This one didn't quite hit the horror, but if you wanted to end it off with an actual horror, it would be The Others. At the same time, if you wanted to watch, like girls, a group of girls and sisters kind of thing, I would say Pride and Prejudice is also very close to a plot like this. But as we were recording, I actually thought of something. And if you talked about a mysterious stranger who starts out really nice and gets really dark, I thought of a movie, and that would be The Guest, which, Dan Stevens is really incredible in. And the movie itself is really incredible. So if you haven't seen that movie is really great.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an after-hours pick at some point, because I really want to go sort of look a bit deeper. But no, The Guest, I remember when that came out, and it became one of those films where, especially over a Gentleman's Guide for Midnight Cinema, where it seemed like everyone was talking about this film. It came out of nowhere, and then suddenly all everyone wanted to talk about was just The Guest. So I really love it when you have this film that comes out of nowhere and suddenly becomes the hottest thing that everyone wants to talk about. Another one I would throw into that same category would be Needful Things, which is based on Stephen King book of the same name, where a mysterious shopkeeper sets up a shop in a small quiet town, offering objects of desire to the local residents in exchange for, as he calls them, tricks, ultimately causing chaos and confusion in the town as these tricks all suddenly start to cross over with one another. It's a really great Stephen King adaptation, and often one that's kind of forgotten rather unfairly, especially as it features a really great central performance by Max von Sydow, and one definitely worth checking out. Similar to The Beguiled, if you like this, I would also check out Black Narcissus from 1947, which is about a group of Anglican nuns in the Himalayan mountains, and the chaos that their world is thrown into when a government worker, Mr. Dean, shows up at the convent, stirring feelings within certain members of the convency. On the horror track as well, Nicole Kidman movie I'd really recommend checking out would be Stoker, which is Park Chan-wook's English debut, I think.
Oh yeah,
Kidman,
that one is amazing.
yeah, Kidman's performance here is very similar to the one we see her playing Stoker, and all the time watching it, I was like just constantly like thrown back to her performance there, and it just reminds me that she's got such versatility as an actress, and especially now as she at this sort of later stage of her career, she's sort of like really sort of pushing herself out more and taking a lot more sort of interesting and more challenging roles, which is really interesting to see. Yeah, those are going to be the ones I would recommend going with if you enjoy this. I mean, obviously you can go back and watch the Don Siegal version as well, which is pretty good, and obviously see the film from a male perspective, as well as seeing a young rugged Clint Eastwood if that does anything for you. So, but yeah, that must be our further watching. Obviously we're at the end of season 3 now, and what a delight it has obviously been. And as with every season, we like to look back and really highlight for ourselves really what's been sort of the best and what's been the worst, and what's really been the hidden gem of this filmography we've obviously been reevaluating over the course of the season. So, Kim, I mean, starting with the best film, what did you enjoy the most in the filmography this season?
I'm kind of torn between two, and I haven't quite decided yet. So how about you go first?
For myself, I would say Lost in Translation, which I think it may seem as a bit of an obvious pick, but no matter how many times I've seen this film, it's just I constantly like notice details, or I just find a different scene that I really enjoy within it. And certainly the chemistry between Bill Murray's character and Scarlett Johansson's character is just so natural, and it's got such flow. The fact that Coppola gives them a chance to like improv, and when you're with someone like Bill Murray who's just so natural, if you give him sort of any sort of free rein to just run with material, he would certainly just take it and just choose wonderful things, which obviously did here. And it really gave us the start of him perfecting his less is more technique that we would obviously see him replicate again when we look at Jim Jarmusch's Broken Flowers. And I did just everything about that film is just a delight from start to finish.
So, well, we're kind of at the same spot, because Lost in Translation was ranked the top movie for me for pretty much the entire season, right?
Okay.
And then The Beguiled came around, and then I was like really captured by the movie, and I like both of them for different reasons. So I haven't quite decided which I like, but I'm gonna go with The Beguiled just to be different.
That's right.
I have a feeling that our worst and hidden gem might be very similar.
Okay.
There's not that much filmography to choose from, so yeah, no. But I mean, you know what I really liked about The Beguiled, and I mean, we just had a long discussion about it, so I'm not gonna dive too deep, but you know, I really like the complexities in the character. I really like how the film was shot. I really like the setting, and you know that there's a lot of careful details here that are done really nice. And I think one of the things I liked the most was, you know, The Beguiled feels like one of those movies in her filmography where I feel genuinely like captivated by watching. Like, I felt thrilled to watch because it's a thriller. So I felt really thrilled and got that whole thriller element in there. Obviously, you know, adding on to, you know, Lost in Translation, that movie is not the same. It's not comparable because it's not the same thing. It's just from the same director. So, you know, Lost in Translation also has all those great points that you talked about. You know, Bill Murray, Scarlett Johansson, you know, they're great. And just, you know, that chemistry and that friendship they have is something that, you know, that's one of the reasons why I you know, Lost in Translation in the second viewing did so much for me. But I think The Beguiled wins just because it was a first viewing and I still liked it a lot.
Oh, definitely. This is the first viewing for myself, and it's weird the fact that it came out in 2017 and nobody ever talks about The Beguiled.
I feel like it did when it first came out. I feel like a lot of people talked about it, and then something else came out, and then that got kind of like, you know, took over, right?
I just never remember hearing or seeing anything about this film.
I remembered seeing it, and I remember Nicole Kidman being talked about in it, and then that was about it. I didn't remember anything else from it, so I don't know.
Because I mean, I went into it thinking, oh my god, this is like this film. She's made this absolute clunk of a film. So I went in like completely blind, not really knowing anything about it, and just had an absolute blast with it. And then you go on like Letterboxd and you suddenly see everyone's like, 5 4-star ratings. It's like, wow, this is like this amazing film. And much like the recent remake of Murder on the Orient Express, it's all like, why did I not get around to watching this earlier? This is fantastic. So I totally see why you would have it in that top spot category. I mean, it came very close to myself, but I felt at the same time I wanted to watch it a couple more times before I sort of like could fully commit to it being that number one. But yeah, I could definitely see why you would rank this so highly.
So where are we going next? Hidden gem or worse?
I think let's go for hidden gem. Let's mix things up slightly.
So what's your hidden gem?
Hidden gem for myself, and this might come with a little bit of a surprise for you. I'm going to say Virgin Suicides.
Oh, why would that be a hidden gem? Everybody knows about it.
For myself, it's the fact that I dismiss it for like the longest time because it didn't connect. I didn't like the ending, and I didn't like so many elements with it. And while it's certainly not a perfect film, watching it again for this time around, there's so many elements of the film. Certainly, like with James Woods' performance, and like just the performance from the parental characters of the film. And yes, it's not a perfect film, but there's so many scenes within that film when you look at it a lot more closely, they're just so charming or interesting, such as like when we've got the epilogue sequence and they're talking about the fact that the swamp is algae over producing all this noxious gas, and we've cut to this sort of like graduation party where like the guests are in tuxedos and gowns and wearing gas masks, and it's sort of like, wow, how did I forget that scene? Or even more simpler scenes such as when they're playing records over the phone to the girls. Those sort of scenes really sort of charmed me, and it just like you could see like a director coming into her own even at this sort of early stage, just how she was experimenting with how shots were done. And yes, it's still got a very flawed film and very there's certainly scenes where the structure, I think towards the final quarter, I think it doesn't quite hold up, and there are other issues, but certainly in terms of like examining it just like a filmography sort of stance, I think it's that's why I chose it as my sort of hidden gem. I think it's one that's definitely worth a reevaluation if you've not looked at it in a while. Yes, so for yourself, what would you say is the hidden gem then?
Well, obviously, Virgin Suicides is a really great choice. I think mostly because, I agreed the same thing with you that, when I went to watch back, there was a lot of really great things. But I think for me, the hidden gem had to be Somewhere, mostly because it's never talked about. Yeah, no, so Somewhere is really like a hidden gem, mostly because it's, no one talks about it. And it's that one film in her filmography where she takes kind of a male perspective. And at the same time, I really like, obviously I've mentioned when we were recording for Somewhere that I have a very special love for movies that portray father and daughter relationships. And I think that in this one, it's done really well in the sense that, the character develops really well, and Stephen Dorff does a fantastic job. Elle Fanning is really great as the daughter. So there's a lot to love about Somewhere, and I think it gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah, I think it gets overlooked a lot because of the pacing for it. The fact that a lot of people don't get the fact that she wants to like focus on certain shots for a long time to show the banality of his existence. Really, the fact that she like focuses on the opening shot of like him driving the Ferrari around the track, or when he's being fit for the prosthetic.
Exactly.
Just those long in shots that I think meant it doesn't sort of sit with a lot of people, and certainly for like I would say about the first 40 minutes of that film, it is a little bit of a slow burn, and I think that's what stopped me from sort of having it as that hidden gem. Because I was like looking at it, it's like, well, which of these films do I feel that is sort of like an appreciation and I want to go back and study more, and that's why I obviously went more with the Virgin Suicides, because I just found there was more to sort of like dive into and examining like just the shots and the structure. And obviously with Somewhere, it's A lot more on the screen. It's a lot more minimalistic. But yeah, there's certainly the father-daughter scenes and just the evolution of their relationship is just so charming to watch, especially when you look at the autobiographical details she put in for like experiences of growing up on her own father's sets, and like when they're eating like gelato in the bed, and they go to like the awards ceremony. Like the scenes in Italy in particular are just so much fun. So
So I mean, we're going to the worst, which I think we're probably going to both have the same thing.
Yeah, I think that we do. I think anyone who's listened to obviously the season from start to finish, I'm guessing that we're both going for Marie Antoinette here. So yeah, we're saying Marie Antoinette is one to burn this filmography. And actually, I have to say that while we're obviously dismissing it as the worst filmography, even as the worst film, it's still a film worth checking out. Certainly the first half of Marie Antoinette I really enjoyed. It's only once we get into the second half and really the life of the married Marie Antoinette and her reign as queen that the film sort of slows down and sort of grinds to a halt. And certainly the Verne over at Cinema Recall was nice enough to give us his own in-depth evaluation of the film as well, which I think, as I said, I mean, I was surprised that he named it as his favourite film of the filmography when you consider the films that she's obviously made. But yeah, it's, as I said, it's the one that if we're like looking at films to return to, it's the one that I'm like, no, I'm not that sort of fussed to return to it, even though that first half is fun and there's a lot to enjoy there.
I mean, for sure. It's hard. I guess, for us, we knew right away what was the worst movie that in her filmography. But yet, Marie Antoinette is also the most colorful movie in her filmography, which makes it, kind of, it still has a lot of fun elements to it. And, there's obviously like that sort of humor to it that really works. But, in the end, it's just, if we were to talk about pacing issues or even like just how it ends and how the movie flows, there's like really nice like contemporary music clashing with that classic thing, that period drama thing, which gives it that uniqueness, but yet it just feels like something's missing from it all the time. And it's just not really at par to, the rest of her filmography. I think that's what we're really saying, is that there's a lot to appreciate here, but it's just a little bit away from everything else in her filmography.
Yeah, it would be interesting as well if we had included A Very Merry Christmas in this filmography, whether Marie Antoinette would have still been at the bottom of the pile. I mean, certainly for myself, I would say that it was, even though I know there was quite a few people who were obviously disappointed with A Very Merry Christmas. I think more than likely expecting more a laugh a minute sort of performance from Bill Murray rather than the more subtle and sedate and often interpretive performance that we did get from him. So but okay. I mean, I liked A Very Merry Christmas. I thought it was fun to have on when you're in that post turkey haze.
Well, I'll definitely consider it for this year's Christmas marathon. Then,
if you want something for when you've got your food coma on, then it's quite gentle and fun to watch in the background. If you're watching it as like your kickstart movie, you're like, "Woo, it's Christmas!" You're gonna be a little disappointed because it's not got the right tone or pitch to it. So, unlike that Kurt Russell Christmas movie, which was great last year. So, yeah. I mean, obviously Sofia Coppola, she's currently filming On the Rocks, another father-daughter relationship movie.
Yay.
Which it's going to see a reuniting with Bill Murray, who the film itself, from the premise that we have here, it's going to follow a young mother who reconnects with a larger-than-life playboy father on an adventure through New York. The film being noted as the first collaboration between Apple and A24. A24, much like Blumhouse being the studio at the moment, they're obviously, if you're not familiar with A24, they produce a lot of sort of the more arty and interesting independent films such as Ex Machina and The Lobster and Spring Breakers. And they also are responsible for giving us The Witch, or The Witch, depending on how you read that.
The Witch, yeah.
I'm never sure because it looks like two V's. So it's
supposed to be it's supposed to be two V's.
Okay.
It is supposed to be two V's, but people read it as The Witch.
Yeah. So that will be her first collaboration with this new partnership as well. So it'll be interesting to obviously see how that goes. Because at the moment we're not seeing anything at all from it at the moment, which is really frustrating. And Coppola herself, being as publicity shy as she is, I mean, she's got this delightful awkwardness to her interviews whenever you see her trying to do promotion work. So she's not exactly one to sort of like put herself out there and go, we're making this movie and it's going to have this scene. So I'm really sort of interested to see how that obviously goes. So
yeah. Well, we'll eventually figure out some way, because all the directors we're working on right now that we've talked about so far all have stuff coming out in 2020 or something. So we'll have to figure out some way to like fill in those gaps of our directors that we worked in or something.
We'll do a Redux season or something.
Yeah, we'll do a Redux season to catch up on everybody's work that we've done, and by maybe the 8th season we will have 8 episodes to go. So
cool.
Yeah.
Well, that as I said, this brings us to the end of another season. So thank you everyone for listening. As always, if you want to check out our full archive, not only this season but our previous seasons on Paul W. Santon and Guillermo del Toro, you can find out at moviesandtpodcast.wordpress.com. You can also find us on social media. We're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, where we post interesting bits and pieces, as well as obviously announcements for the episode. And if you haven't done already, please do hit the like and subscribe buttons and leave us a review, as it all helps raise the profile of the show and helps us get more exposure out there. But for our next episode, we're obviously into the after hours portion of our block. So where are we going next? Because obviously next week is going to be Shark Week 3.
yeah, Shark Week 3. We're going for something well, what did we do before? Oh yeah, no. We're going fairly modern. We're jumping back, from Deep Blue Sea. We've moved forward again, back to something a little bit more recent, and that is The Shallows from 2016, featuring the beautiful and very lovely Blake Lively.
Yep. The Shallows obviously being most noteworthy for being a good shark movie, alongside The Meg, which obviously kick-started our whole Shark Week phenomena here on the show. So we also will have another couple of After Hours episodes where both myself and Kim are going to be picking films to discuss as well. So make sure you definitely stay tuned and join us for that, as next time we will be discussing The Shallows. Also, keep an eye out for the Lambcast, as Kim has made another appearance on there. So you can hear Kim talk about It Chapter 2 and representing the brand. So well done.
Yeah, representing the ladies as well, since I'm the only girl in that show.
But again, thank you as always for listening. Thank you to Kim, and we'll be back next time to talk about The Shallows.